It's great to see you all here. As we continue our talk series today, looking at faith and work, we've entitled it, Why Do We Work? And over the past 2 weeks, we've looked at providing for ourselves through work and caring for the world through work. And today, we're thinking about developing the world through work. Now, I want to start by putting on the screen some mission statements of some famous companies in the world, and we'll see if you can guess what they are. So the first one says this: to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. Who do you think that is? Very good. You're going to find these all far too easy. Next one: to bring transportation for everyone, everywhere. Uber, very good. Next one: to build a place where people can come to find and discover anything they might want to buy online. That's the easiest one, Amazon. Next one: to help create a world where you can belong anywhere and where people can live in a place instead of just traveling to it. Airbnb, very good. And for 5 out of 5, to give people the power to build community and bring the world closer together. Facebook, okay, so you all know these 5 mission statements. Not sure what you make of them. I think they're amazing. I think they're wonderful. I think they're very inspiring things. I mean, can you imagine to have all the world's knowledge right at your fingertips? We have a lot of it already. Some parts of the world don't. But they want everyone on the planet to have all the world's information right there. That is an amazing thing. Being able to buy whatever you want online. We can buy a lot, we click it, it comes to our doorstep for everyone in the world to buy whatever they want online. And as for bringing the world closer together, boy, do we need that right now with all the division and conflict there is around us. These are wonderful things, these mission statements. But before we get too excited and perhaps have too high expectations for work and what our work can achieve, it's worth pointing out how these companies have also caused a great deal of harm in pursuit of their mission. So Uber was once famously described by Peter Thiel, the tech investor, as without question the most ethically challenged company in Silicon Valley. Airbnb has seen a huge global crackdown on its properties over the past year because of the way it is hollowing out cities, with a lack of homes for long-term lease, as well as the noise and disruption for people's neighbors. Even San Francisco, where Airbnb has its headquarters, now has the strictest rules in the world when it comes to Airbnb lets. Just yesterday, during Amazon Prime Day, well, the last 2 days, Monday and Tuesday, did you read about the thousands of employees across the world who are striking because of what they call the inhumane conditions that they have to work in the warehouses? On average, they have to collect one of the Amazon items every 8 seconds for 10 hours a day. Did you see in the news this week about Google? The Google Home smart speakers have been found to listen to your conversations at home, even when the speakers are not activated. Belgian broadcaster VRT discovered recordings including arguments between couples, explicit conversations in the bedroom, men searching for pornography, confidential business calls, and private talks with children. People are not impressed with that. Facebook was in the news also this week because of its $5 billion fine from the Federal Trade Commission for sharing the information of 87 million users with Cambridge Analytica without the users' permission. I was chatting to a friend on Monday night, and separately he was talking about how he wants to try his hardest to protect his daughter from what he called the evils of social media, because this Facebook news had just hit. I said, "Oh, are you on Facebook?" And he said, yes, I am on Facebook, but only to see the disintegration of Western civilization from my armchair. So I'm not sure if you're as pessimistic as my friend when it comes to these companies. But look, you can see the problem. These companies can be the source of so much good. They can also be the source of evil. There is no doubt that Facebook does bring the world together in the sense that it connects you with people over the internet, across the world, and can reconnect you with friends you've not seen in ages, that you've lost touch with. But also we're hearing about these advanced algorithms that end up only sending you news or articles about the things that you'll be interested in, can end up leaving people in echo chambers, only listening to people that they agree with, and people ending up being more polarized than ever before. So do you see the good, the evil? Which one between these two is going to win out in the end? Should we be ultimately optimistic about our work and who we work for, or ultimately pessimistic about where it may lead? Are we really developing the world through work? Will we end up destroying the world through work? How do we get a realistic expectation on these companies, on our companies, on work in general, on our work? So you go back today knowing exactly what you're about in your office, your workplace. Well, look, come with me now to Genesis chapter 4, this foundational passage for understanding God's perspective on our work. First of all, in verses 19 to 22, we do see the wonder of work and the progress that can be made through our work. Verse 19, Lamech married two women, one named Ada and the other Zillah. Ada gave birth to Jubal. He was the father of those who live in tents and raise livestock. His brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all who played stringed instruments and pipes. Zillah also had a son, Tubal-Cain, who forged all kinds of tools out of bronze and iron. Now, what a family we have here. One son invents farming and the economy. Another son invents music and the arts. A third son invents tools and life-changing technology. Here is the equivalent of Adam Smith, Mozart, and Steve Jobs all coming from the same family, right? The Kardashians may be incredibly famous today. They are nothing compared to this family here. Now, what is significant about these verses in this section of Genesis, right now at this part of the story? Well, two reasons. First, did you notice how the names of these three sons all sound quite similar? Jubal, Jubal, Tubal. Hebrew scholars will tell you how each of these three names come from the Hebrew word yibal, meaning to yield or produce. And do you remember why God first created Adam and Eve back in chapter 1, verse 28, which we looked at a couple of weeks ago? God blessed them and said to Adam and Eve, to mankind, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. And that is exactly what this family is doing here. Be fruitful. What are they doing? Producing fruit, yielding fruit. It's in their very names. And the interesting thing here is that they are taking it to the next level with farming, with arts, with technology. Here is advancement, progress in the fulfillment of God's creation mandate. Here is the wonder of human progress through work, developing the world, taking it to the next level through work. Do you work in the markets? Do you work in the arts? Do you work in technology? Technology, by the way, in its most basic form, means the production of any good or service. I mean, imagine all of us in some way are involved in this sort of work. That's what work is. So do you see the role you are playing, no matter how mundane and menial your job may feel at times, the role you're playing in the development of God's world? It is a wonderful thing, the wonder of work. A second reason why these verses are so significant, this family, these three sons, this advancement in the development of the world, it's so significant because it comes from a family who are very far from God. Glance back to verse 16. So Cain went out from the Lord's presence and lived in the land of Nod, east of Eden. What's in Eden? The Garden of Eden. What's in the Garden of Eden? The very presence of God. Where is Cain going? Away from the Lord's presence, away from Eden, to the east of it. He has just murdered his brother Abel. It is the first murder recorded in the Bible. There is this incredibly evil act, and he's going away. And yet, verse 17, God enables Cain to still make love to his wife, and for her to become pregnant, and for them to continue to be fruitful and to multiply, as God always created humanity to do. Even though we hear in verse 18 about this man called Mehushael, which the word means smitten by God, he is still able to father a child. And in verse 19, even though Lamech marries two women, in direct defiance of what God had said in chapter 2 about marriage being between one man and one woman for life. He is still able to father these 3 sons who bring in this great advancement in human progress. In other words, it doesn't matter how much we turn from God, run from his presence, disobey his commands, we are still made in his image. We are still made to be fruitful, to multiply, and to develop his world, whether we realize it or not. As far as I'm aware, Steve Jobs was a self-proclaimed Buddhist, so he had no belief in a personal God or the God of the Bible. And yet the change he brought to God's world in terms of design, beauty, music, the mobile phone, laptops, etc., it is unprecedented. Personally, I love my iPhone, the things it can do for me. Thank you, Steve Jobs. Thank you to anyone, everyone who is working to develop God's world. It is a wonderful thing. The wonder of work, the wonder of human progress through work. In his book, Progress, 10 Reasons to Look Forward to the Future, Johan Norberg shows how poverty, malnutrition, illiteracy, child labor, and infant mortality are falling faster than at any other time in human history. Just 35 years ago, 9 in 10 Chinese citizens lived in extreme poverty. Today, only 1 in 10 do. Back then, only half of the world's population had access to safe water. Now, 91% do. During the 25 years since the end of the Cold War, global economic wealth, or GDP per capita, has increased almost as much as it did during the preceding 25,000 years. Now, is that not incredible? The wonder of human progress through work. The wonder of developing God's world, and the speed of change we are seeing right now. Did you know that we recently sent a spacecraft to Jupiter, traveling at 165,000 miles per hour? That's from here to Reading in 1 second. Back in 2010, the world's first full face transplant was performed on a man who'd severely damaged the front of his head in an accident. He got a new nose, new lips, new teeth, new cheekbones in just 24 hours of surgery. There is more memory in our smartphones than in the very first mainframe computer 30 years ago that would take up a whole room. Our parents used to send letters to each other and had to wait a while to receive them. Now you and I can instantaneously video call our partner or spouse or friend on the other side of the planet as if they were in the next room. Did you know you can now 3D print a house? You can 3D print a house in less than 24 hours for only $11,000. Just imagine the world my children, your children, our grandchildren are going to grow up in. The wonder of work, the wonder of developing the world through our work. So you say, surely we should be optimistic for the future and what we can achieve. Not so fast. Because the second thing to see from this passage, and something each of us needs to recognize, as uncomfortable as it might be about ourselves, is the horror of what humanity is capable of. And we see this in verses 23 to 24. Lamech said to his wife, this is Lamech, the father of the 3 sons we've just been speaking about. Lamech said to his wives, Ada and Zillah, listen to me. Wives of Lamech, hear my words. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for injuring me. If Cain is avenged 7 times, then Lamech 77 times. And so straight after this step forward in the fulfillment of God's creation mandate, the very next verse, straight after this advancement in developing God's world, we see that tragically human nature remains the same. Beforehand, Cain, what does he do? Murder his brother, Abel. And what happens right after this progression, this advancement with the arts, the music, technology, we get another murder. This time by Lamech, and just because a guy has wounded him. And these words in verses 23 to 24 are written as a poem. They're written as a song. Lamech is boasting here to his wives about what he's done. He's taunting his victim. Here is human pride and human ego in all its ugly darkness. This is the horror of what humanity is capable of, and something we need to reckon with to temper our optimism when it comes to what we can achieve through our work. In his book, Straw Dogs, English political philosopher and atheist John Gray says this: "We like to think that the tide of history is an inexorable march from barbarity to civilization, with humans progressing from one stage to the next through a gradual process of enlightenment. But we have failed to factor in the flaws of human nature. Science increases human power, but magnifies the flaws in human nature. It enables us to live longer and have higher living standards than in the past, but at the same time, it allows us to wreak destruction on each other and the earth on a larger scale than ever before. Of course, there have always been tyrannies, but without railways, the telegraph pole, poison gas, there could have been no Holocaust. Without modern means of transport and communication, Stalin and Mao could not have built their gulags. Humanity's worst crimes were made possible only by modern technology." Now look, he's focusing in here on a couple of extreme examples, but the point remains the same, whatever we do and whatever the work you and I are involved in today. We can develop the world through work. We can also destroy the world through our work. We invent incredible things. We also commit terrible evils. The wonder of the aeroplane, the horror of 9/11. The wonder of the World Wide Web, the horror of internet pornography. The wonder of the surgeon's scalpel, this full-face transplant. The horror of 13-year-old children stabbing and murdering each other with similar types of blades. The horror of what humanity is capable of. And that's why these companies I mentioned at the start, or the companies we work for today, can be the source of so much good and evil. That's why we see both, because we run them and we work for them. And this is what we are capable of. Look, this is some tough things to hear. We need to realize, yes, we are made in the image of God, and so we will develop the world through work. And that's a wonderful thing, but that image of God in us is broken. That is what has always been the case since the fall of Adam and Eve in Genesis 3. God's image in us is broken. It is fallen. We see it in Cain. We see it in Lamech. We see it in our own hearts today. Brilliant in the office, a terrible spouse at home. Able to solve complex problems, but unable to control our temper. Changing the world through the latest product, but then destroying ourselves in the throes of addiction. Developing the world, destroying the world. And so how do we reconcile the two? Is there a way out of this good and evil side by side? Well, look, let me finish with verses 25 and 26. And here, just a hint of hope. Adam made love to his wife again, and she gave birth to a son and named him Seth, saying, "God has granted me another child in place of Abel, since Cain killed him." Seth also had a son, and he named him Enosh. Now, why does the author of Genesis go back to Adam right now, at this point? Well, back in chapter 3, after the fall of Adam and Eve, when everything goes wrong for humanity, God gives a hint of hope. God says there will be a seed from the line of Eve who will crush the serpent's head, the one who tempted Adam and Eve into sin in the first place. It is only a hint of hope. But after Cain kills Abel and Cain runs away, where is that hope? It's gone. There's no seed. But now, verse 25, Adam makes love to his wife again. She gives birth to a son. There's a new seed. And guess what happens at the end of verse 26? At that time, people began to call on the name of the Lord. What is this saying? It is saying there is hope for humanity. There is hope through a seed. And in the wider biblical story, which we don't have time to go into now, that seed is Jesus Christ. who at the end of his life is dying on a cross, bearing the full horror of everything that humanity is capable of. And he is dying in our place so we can be forgiven by God and restored to God and now work for God and use our jobs rightly and have the wonder of work for how it was always intended. So let me encourage you all to be heading back to work with this perspective in mind. Take pride in your work. Take satisfaction in your work. It is part of being a human being made in his image to develop the world through work, no matter how menial you think your job is or a task is right now. It is not. It is wonderful. God loves it. But don't be too optimistic about your work and what it can achieve, because apart from the work of Jesus Christ, humanity is capable of some truly evil things. So don't be surprised when you see it in your company, and don't be surprised when you see it in your own heart. Instead, call on the name of the Lord and continue to call on the name of the Lord. He is the one hope for humanity. Seek his forgiveness, seek his power to change, and align your work with his. That's why we work. Well, let me pray that for us now. Let me pray. Father, thanks very much for this foundational passage in Genesis and what it shows us about our work and the wonder of it and the human progress and development of the world that come through it. And we're in the middle right now of a time of incredible change. So would we take a real encouragement from that? And would it put a spring in our step when it comes to our attitude to work and as we go back to the office now? But would we do so not too optimistic about it, recognizing the sinfulness of human nature and what we are capable of, not just in our companies, but ourselves in our own lives. And therefore, would we continue to fix our eyes on Jesus, call on the name of the Lord, seek his forgiveness, seek his power to change, and live our lives and do our work as he always intended us to do it. We ask it for Jesus' sake. Amen.